can't help myself but to get involved and pick something up. And so, hey, this could be the last time that I get to put a tent up. This year, I want to say to the community, this could be your last chance to come to a tent. We have had Larry Serber leave the planet.
Give me a heart attack right now.
I had cancer 3 years ago. I don't know if I'm going to be here next year. Can't help myself but to get involved and pick something up. And so, hey, this could be the last time that I get to put a tent up.
With each other?
We are thankful for our viewers staying with us. We really appreciate, people who, I would say, you went through an ordeal there on the headliners. And
circus.
It was aptly put. It's funny that Troy named it our work a circus, and when he comes on, it's just really a free-for-all. I mean, you could not keep a train of thought, and so what we want to do is we're going to break a few of these things down. James, what video, for the community's sake, would you like to?
Well, I think one of the things that I'd like to start with is something. Of course, this is one of those things that you can't really get Troy to say because, speaking of circus, he's juggling topics.
Right.
So, but one of the things that I know he said previously, and if you can play this for me, it's the video where he's talking about you can't speak against homosexuality or can't judge unless you've walked in their shoes. He made that similar statement tonight.
Okay.
But he's made this previous statement, and
you recognize it right there on
that's it, right there.
No,
right here.
Okay. Got audio for that?
Stand by. Coming through. I'm not getting any audio now.
The ghost of Troy passed.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah.
Right.
Hang on, it might be a channel thing. Just give me a second.
This is the one we were actually playing when we tested.
So, but like I say, what you're going to hear him say on here is something that he addressed earlier in the program.
Your sexuality is going to be your choice.
It's not
now, if it offends
that way.
Here we go.
The choice of your sexuality is going to be your choice.
It's not
now,
choice.
if it offends
that way. It's not a choice.
You think it's a choice? I think it's a choice.
Nah. Okay, unless like I tell people, and here is one of my main things: unless you are gay yourself, you have no idea.
Well,
you have,
I don't have an idea.
Exactly. So why would somebody have come up with that saying I have a choice? Do I choose to be? That would be crazy for me to choose to be this way, where people hate me.
Let me rephrase.
All right, now, so you can't judge me until you can't say it unless I've been there. Wait, now, one of the things that he said later on, we were talking about different kind of perverted types of sexual perversion, I guess, and then if he makes a statement there about animal sex. Now, he actually said it's immoral. Now, one of the things we asked him about was, where's this moral and immoral? Where's this standard? That's the same thing we had with Larry.
Right.
They all want their own standard. They all want their own version of right and wrong, and they won't let you have yours.
Right.
But they want yours. So my question was, if you can't say something is right or wrong until you've walked in their shoes and been that way, I wonder when did Troy have sex with an animal in order to come up with this idea that it's wrong?
Like we actually need to restate that because I don't know that everybody followed that. Until you've done it, you can't then judge it.
Right.
So all of you folk out there who are basically making statements about anybody's behavior according to Troy, unless you've done it first, then you can't judge them. I mean, how ridiculous is that when you break it down? And Troy, I think he weighed in on the transgender society tonight.
Well, I'll go ahead and play the one where he said about the animals. I would like to play that. There you go.
I'd like to hear Troy argue against a psychiatrist in the University of Toronto who's now saying the same thing that Troy said about his homosexuality.
Okay.
Cannot choose.
You ready? You ready for this? Okay. This is common sense going from somebody, a human, okay? Listen to this real carefully. You keep trying to compare us to animals or whatever, having sex with animals. When an animal can tell me yes or no, he wants to have sex with me, then we'll say it's morally right. Until then, it's going to be morally wrong.
Okay.
All right. So think about that now. So he says it's morally wrong because the animal can't say yes or no. Well, how does he know that? I mean, how does he get to make that choice or that decision unless he's actually been involved in it? You know? I can't condemn homosexuality because I haven't walked in his shoes or haven't been a homosexual or I'm not a homosexual. Well, how does he get to say that about bestiality then?
Well, and here's another interesting thing too, Charles. I'm so used to being on the headliner.
Sorry, don't tell Charles.
Here is 174 of this is the sexual behavior in the human male. Right now, all of our society is basically following the supposed scientific research of Alfred Kinsey and the Kinsey Institute, I forget which college it is, up in Indiana, and he is basically promoting on page 174 the very thing that Troy, now I disagree that Kinsey has any credentials,
right,
but it seems like everybody else is quoting Kinsey on a regular basis in court cases and everything else, and then Troy comes along and he debunks Kinsey on the one hand when he says animal contact is all right, but then Kinsey comes along and he makes it legitimate for Troy to be like he is. As a matter of fact, James, this is the diagnostic manual for the American Psychiatric Association, and guess who they quote to say that Troy is no longer sick after 1994? Kinsey. So on the one hand, he's yaying Kinsey's research, which Kinsey claims to have just been involved with, I think he said 10% of the society. They were willing to admit that they're homosexuals. Now, when in the world, in what century could you get 10% of the society to admit to homosexuality? Guess when that was? 1948.
Right.
Who in the world do you think was willing to admit that they were a homosexual in 1948? Well, you don't have to guess. I can tell you. Prisoners. That's where the research came from. So the research that helps Troy not be sick anymore, according to this, the Psychiatric Association, is actually the research came from prisoners, and he takes it on the one hand, but on the other, he just casts it out, kind of like he did his transgender friends.
Right.
They are under the bus tonight.
So can we revisit that? Do we have
the transgender?
Yeah.
That's some hot material there. I can't get to it that quick.
Okay. All
right. Brian, if you were going to make us a DVD, Charles said during the show that if it slowed down on your end that you could make us a DVD. We would try to revisit some of that. And did you send me another one?
I sent you another one.
All adultery? No.
No.
Let's see. Let me go up.
Yeah, you read. It jumped. They all say.
Okay, hold on just a second.
But what we're talking about here.
Pedophile?
No.
I don't think we played this one.
They all start like this. I don't think that's not mine, but
okay.
You can play it. I mean.
All right, let's just see what this is.
I'm not attracted to young boys or whatever. Like I said, I'm gay. I'm attracted to other men. If I find someone attracted to young boys, yes, I think that's wrong because it's
what did they say?
Whether that is a sickness. If you want to have something to do with a child or whatever, that's a sickness.
Now the American.
Okay, go ahead.
Now I was saying. Now let's go back to what he said, arguing about homosexuals. Here we were saying homosexuality is wrong, and he just doesn't like that.
Right. Unless you've been in his shoes. Okay.
And now he's saying being with a child is wrong.
Okay.
Now when was he with a child?
Right.
Now, so we've got Troy. He's had to have been with an animal and a child to make that statement, to be consistent.
Absolutely. All right. On page 528, again, we're going to give the manual for a diagnostic and statistical manual of mental disorders. This is the American Psychiatric Association, page 528. And guess what they say now? They actually differ with Troy. I'm going to read a couple of statements here. The individual with pedophilia must be age 16 or older and at least 5 years older than the child. James, when I'm reading some of these statements, it's like.
So a 16-year-old has to be with a
11-year-old.
11-year-old.
Yeah, a 10 or 11-year-old. Yeah. Now, it's kind of like, okay, I'm not trying to make a case for Troy, but I'm just saying these people, they just change their stuff around on a it's
whim.
Like a whim. And let's see what they say about transvestites and transsexuals, 269. Now, he says that he doesn't agree that they actually change, regardless
Right.
of what kind of
The way you're born, the
operations.
way you're born.
That's exactly right. All right. So here's what they say about a diagnostic. It says about a transsexual person. In a transsexualism, there is a persistent wish to be rid of one's own sexual identity. I'm going to use that rather than the words that they use, and to live as a member of the other sex. And there is never any sexual excitement with cross-dressing. In other words, you cross-dressing transvestite. That's your
Right.
vest. Changing
Right.
your clothes. It's not exciting enough. Now you got to change your entire behavior and think that you're a woman if you're in fact a man. The individual with transvestism considers himself to be basically a male, whereas the anatomical male transsexual has a female sexual identity. Now, in this is the 1980. It says they're sick, and so you can't get any of these guys to agree with. I don't agree with these folks either,
Right.
because they changed their rules at a whim.
Right.
But at the same time, on the one hand, they're basically saying, well, the Psychiatric Association says we're not sick anymore, so homosexualism's all right. And it's yay, go.
Yeah.
But then you turn right around and have something that they say that is in favor of us. They don't want to.
Yeah.
They won't accept.
And that's why we're saying this whole thing about the whole standard, what is right and what is wrong. When Troy or anybody says moral, immoral, right, wrong, by whose standard, by what standard, what is the rule? Where's the line in the sand that we're going to say this is when you cross this, it's wrong? I mean, who is it? It can't be this, because they change every 5 years or whatever.
Well, listen to this. What you actually keyed in on was the age of a pedophilia, the pedophilia behavior. Okay, this is 1994. This is 1980. Now listen to the difference.
14 years earlier.
Right. Listen to the difference. It says isolated sexual acts with children do not warrant the diagnosis of a pedophilia. Did you hear that? Isolated sexual acts do not make you a pedophilia.
So you have to do it more than one time.
Absolutely. You actually have to get to the point where it messes up your entire social makeup, as well as your family barriers. It creates family barriers. Now listen to this. Talk about the age. The difference in age between the adult with this disorder and the prepubescent child is arbitrarily set at 10 years or more. So in 1980, if you were 16, then it wouldn't matter unless it was 6 years old.
Yeah.
But in 1994, now, if you're 16, it's 11 years old. Now, it's kind of like, we're sitting back, we're watching this as Christian people, as people who are trying to figure out what is our society, where are they going to land?
Yeah.
It sounds like to me, James, we need to stick with something that's more unchangeable, stable.
Let's change those dates. It says 16 or older.
Okay.
All right, so let's go ahead and make that person 20 years old, and then 15.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, we can see because 16 and 11,
all of society can see that.
Everybody can see that. They're still whatever, but there's a great difference between a 20-year-old and a 15-year-old, mentally, physically, whatever. Right. So, but now if you made that 10 years, so now you got a 20-year-old and a 10-year-old.
Right. So in 1980,
yeah,
a 20-year-old could in fact actually be involved with an 11-year-old and it not be pedophilia.
Right.
So, folks, it looks like it's what we're basically saying is, isn't there a more stable guide here? And why is it that people are just what are we talking about here anyway? It's just like, we're not even talking about marriage anymore.
Right.
It's just like, okay, if we can get the age right, and in fact, James, I'm trying to demonstrate to everybody, Charles included, that Kinsey's goal was to help the pharmaceutical company. That if he could make everybody, including children, sexual, then all of a sudden, it's a boon for the pharmaceutical company. And somebody said, well, why do you say that? Things like your enhancement medicines, those kinds of things.
You don't have to sit in a bathtub with your spouse. You sit in the bathtub, the commercial.
All kinds of stuff now is legal, and if we ever get to the point, folks, I mean, we're already headed this way right now. Planned Parenthood is making it possible now for your child to get an abortion without your consent of a parent.
Right.
Now, if pharmaceuticals can figure out how to vaccinate children, so women, girls, so that they cannot be impregnated, then all of a sudden, all of the moorings, the taboos that I'm telling on you, it's all gone. If we can vaccinate against that, against getting pregnant and venereal disease, then all of a sudden, the whole, and Kinsey played his part. He's removing the guilt associated with having relationship with children. If pharmaceuticals can remove the stigma that comes as a result, and I believe God put this in place. I mean, you think about venereal disease.
Right.
Why is it the case that multiple promiscuity, we'll just say it that way, ends up giving you venereal disease? I mean, God made us in such a way that we end up paying at some point for our behaviors. And I mean, you think about, the friends that you have. I mean, you can just you can drink after friends, Cokes and things of that nature, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get a disease that's going to destabilize the entire society. But you start being promiscuous, in other words, disobeying God's laws regarding such a serious thing as bringing a child into this world.
Right.
It becomes very, very serious, and so these folks are all involved in the same thing.
Well, I thought it was interesting, and I know that they're trying to get a camera shot of Troy's blood test record, whatever. Here's I just got it. I'm clean bill of health.
Yeah.
I don't need a blood.
Yeah. Why do you need it?
I don't need one.
Yeah.
I'm married.
Only the homosexual community.
Yeah.
Needs
Only
to know.
people who are worried about promiscuity.
Right.
Need that.
Yeah.
So I don't worry about that.
Do you think the community even heard that? He said, "I'm safe. I'm always safe." Well, what you're actually doing is you're running around all over the place, doing all kinds of whatever, and all you're wanting the community to hear is, when I drive up with your pizza, I'm safe. You're safe from what? Well, I've been with multiple partners, but I've got my blood test here, and it's just like, don't you realize you're destroying the entire fabric of our nation, but your pizza's clean?
Yeah.
It's just like, is anybody paying attention? Now, James, did you notice that he went to the Old Testament?
Yeah.
You were going to say, go ahead.
I was going to say, Charles was talking about how these trends are the trends are going against us, what we're saying. And that's all the more reason why we're trying to say it louder. And let me just say this. I know it's kind of getting a little off topic, but we were talking about earlier about some of the older generation. There's people that, I just don't like to hear all that. Well, friends, I'm sorry you don't like to hear it, but the fact of the matter is, if you walk outside, there it is. It's at your doorstep. And so you can't really talk about the bad things without calling the bad things, So we're just trying to tell, make you aware about what's going on here.
And we can't continue this as far as this, cover my eyes, cover my ears, and cover my mouth, evil go away. Listen, folks, if you're over 50 years old and you're thinking this is R-rated, you need to wake up. Your children and grandchildren are hearing this in the 2nd grade. Right. James, we were called to school when Caleb was in the 2nd grade because he and 2 of his friends were actually talking about what one of his friends told these little kids in 2nd grade that his sister and her boyfriend were doing. They didn't know what they were saying, but they were repeating what that little boy said. Next thing you know, I'm up to the school. That's when we took our kids out of the public school system. You're going to indoctrinate my children. The filth that's going on in our society is going inside my child's head at the 2nd grade. No, thank you. Yeah. And then we've got a group of individuals who are 50 and above. I'm just going to say that. That's just a number I'm picking. It could be actually
they use arbitrary
numbers. And they don't want to hear this stuff. They're like, this is supposed to be a religious program. Listen, folks, here's a religious verse for you. Romans chapter 1, verse 24. Wherefore God also gave them up to uncleanness to the lust of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves. What do you think he's talking about? This is your God talking about homosexuality, who changed the truth of God into a lie and worship and serve the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this cause God gave them up unto vile affections. Look at this. For even their women did change the natural use into that which was against nature. It is unnatural to do the things that they're doing. Likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust one toward another, men with men, working that which is unseemly, and receiving in themselves that recompense of their error which was meet or suitable. If we don't talk about this, guess what's happening? Troy and them will. And Troy will make it. They try to, when I brought his picture up, Halloween. Yeah. Can we do that again? Do we even know that was Halloween? This is basically the guy that we're talking about here. I don't really believe that was Halloween necessarily. He said that he's cross-dressed before. He runs around with cross-dressing. This is not cross-dressing. This is voodoo or whatever. But don't you know the children are loving that? Yeah. I mean, if you didn't know Uncle Troy, I'm sure that the children just running up to him, just saying what they're trying to do is I couldn't even bring up his Facebook, James. The stuff on his Facebook is so atrocious, and the individuals in this subculture is so atrocious that I couldn't bring it up for regular viewership. This is not your normal part of society, folks. This is a subculture. The transgender folks that he threw under the bus, he actually is friends with them. They have a Sunday night once a month. Is that correct? They have a Sunday night once a month where we all gather together, and we've yet to get our video cameras in there, but it's a thing that's going on a regular basis around here. And if somebody doesn't stop saying, you people in what the Bible say need to quit talking about this stuff, if somebody doesn't start talking about it and putting it in front of people and showing that these folks are not just your neighbor, you're a nice neighbor that you go get a cup of sugar from. Yeah. These are individuals who are trying to destroy our culture.
Well, and I was thinking too about the very fact that don't talk about it, don't talk about it. Well, that gets into the what you're saying about the vaccines or the pharmaceutical. If the more something becomes prevalent, the more accepted it's going to be as norm. It's not necessarily, it's not the norm just because it's accepted.
Right.
That doesn't make it right or wrong, something being accepted, but it will become accepted.
We're being groomed.
That's right. Exactly right. And that is the homosexual agenda. Talk about it loud enough and long enough, and people get tired of it.
Right.
And that's exactly what they just want to beat you down with, just the rhetoric and tire you out. And so then we just say, well, I give up. And so we're saying, no, we're not going to give up.
And Charles says the trends are going against you. And even if they are, does that mean anything? I mean, does that mean we should stop?
That's history, is it not?
I can't wait.
Good has always been dominated by evil at some point.
And I can't wait for the video, where we can play the video, because I thought it was very telling when we actually saw that Charles was going to be affected here at the movie theater by individuals who think they are men, but they're wanting to act like a woman, and he would be forced to let them into the wrong bathroom.
Yeah.
Now, if he had said, well, you know what, I'm open to everybody's civil rights. Boy, you talk about a plunge as far as business is concerned. Hollywood Mountain is actually letting the men go in the girls' bathroom, and that would spread like wildfire. And so I want to stop that rumor. That's Troy's world.
Right.
Troy wishes it was where
we had Larry's world.
We had Larry's world, and Larry was leaning to Troy.
Yeah.
And that's his hero. That's Troy's hero, even though he went down.
Larry.
And so what we're saying, folks, is that this is a very dangerous trend. It wasn't something you were prophesying. It's already taking place in Colorado and in California. They're already passing laws in the school system, and it hadn't got down to public places, but school is pretty public.
Houston.
Yeah,
Houston.
The mayor
the
changed
stupid mayor
things
down
around
there. I mean, how goofy is that? I'll tell you what. One thing's going to happen. We were talking about this the other day with some of the brethren in Tennessee. Is what's going to happen is some man's going to walk into a bathroom, and a man's going to be outside waiting on his wife and daughter to come out.
Right.
And they're going to hear. He's going to hear a scream.
Yeah.
And he's going to run in, and somebody's going to be dead.
Right.
And
Troy, did you hear what he said? People are killing us over this kind of thing. Okay. The other side of that is our safety and our rights are being threatened by your wanting to express your sexuality everywhere, pride sort of thing. Yeah. And so I
want to know. I want to know if Troy has ever been in a gay pride parade.
The things that Troy's done, I don't know if I want to know all the stuff that Troy's done.
I would like to know that.
I don't know. I saw some of the stuff on his Facebook that I was just like, why did I get on here? And the answer really is, folks, Troy is bothered by the Bible.
Right.
The Bible limits his liberty. And tonight I hope that you saw for a moment that James and I demonstrated that Troy is not consistent with this liberty, giving out civil liberties to everybody. He actually drew back when it came down to his transgender friends. He tried to back that up. We're going to make sure it sticks. If we have to do a commercial with Troy throwing his transgender folks up under the bus for the moment, and that's the way all of them are. And folks, we are not crying wolf when we say that pedophilia is the next in line. I have a CNN document. I mean, it's a CNN live show where they're promoting the science that says that pedophilia in the brain is like colorblind. That you were actually born not knowing the difference between your sexual preferences. It's like you didn't get the memo, your brain didn't get the memo that you're supposed to be attracted to the opposite sex. Well, that's homosexuality. They're saying the same gene or the same message memo that was interrupted actually has to do with little children. You didn't get the memo to your brain that you're not supposed to be attracted to individuals that are, within 10 years of you. Yeah. So they're saying it's not, it's not anything that they can help. It's like colorblind. You just don't know that something's brown and something else is red. You don't know the difference between these two manuals. But I can tell you what, if we don't get to knowing the difference between these two manuals, we're all going to be mixed up.
Well, here's something that we talked about earlier too, Johnny, was the idea that Charles says trends are going against us. Well, and they are. And then Troy said something to the effect of, no standard, or don't tell anybody what's right and what's wrong. Well, was it Kinsey that said that if you leave a child by themselves, this is what they would become?
Exactly right. He said that your sexual behavior is all passed down to you from your parents.
Okay, so if we get rid of all the standards,
right,
and we leave the children alone and take the parents out of the equation, then this would be Troy's world. Everybody does their own thing. But the problem with that is our society knows that is not good, because we see daily, really, in the news, parents neglect their children. They leave them alone. They don't do anything with them. And
who do we call?
CPS comes in, Child Protective Services comes in and says, you're an unfit parent because you're leaving your kids alone. Well, this is what Troy's board wants us to do, is leave the kids alone. So
and Kinsey wants it as well. He wants us to stop teaching children that these things are actually wrong. And then Kinsey, this is the thing that blew Larry's mind. Here you have it's a famous chart. I think it's chart 34. My mind went blank. Chart 34 in this book, Human Sexuality, actually has 317 little children that he did all of his research on, many of whom their parents were watching while he did this research to come up with his book. And what he was trying to prove, folks, don't be confused. Charles Kinsey, this seemingly nice individual, they tried to smooth him out in that movie. He was trying to convince you that children, without their parents messing their little brains up, they come into the world wanting sex. What a perverted mindset. And guess who's promoting that as well? Planned Parenthood is involved in promoting that, and so is much of our school system in the, what do you call, sex education classes. Mm-hmm. Many of these sex education classes are adhering, well, all of them adhere to the science, supposedly, that's in this book. And so it's a dangerous world in which we live, and folks, we're not your enemy. We're not, as a guy said on Friday, he said, we're being mean. He said, I'm not going down to the tent because, he said, Johnny's just a mean guy. Really? I'm trying to protect your daughter from having one of Troy's male friends dressed up as a woman. I'm trying to protect your daughter from that friend of Troy's getting into the bathroom with her.
Right.
And Troy himself admitted, he may dress up like a woman, but he's still a man. That was the best quote to me for the night. And they're bisexual,
and
which
you don't know
make up their mind.
You know what kind of deviance is in the mind.
Right.
So I just, it's scary, for my children. And I've had, I just thought about a call that many years ago when we was talking about homosexuality, and maybe some point in the future, some other nights during this meeting, I'll get to play that. But he said, he didn't care about homosexuals. It didn't bother him. And I said, well, thank you very much for thinking about my family.
Right.
At the time, my children were just young. I had one child at the time, probably. And it's like, well, thank you for thinking about society as a whole. And that's our problem. Everybody, it's all about me. That's Troy. What I do what I do. Don't talk about what me.
Well, here's an eye-opener, too, as far as the sexual predator. I mean, you think about the fact that this one particular crime, you actually have to register yourself forever. And that's because of this word, if I can say it right, recidiveness. I should never have tried to say that. The accounts of persons falling back into it.
Yeah.
Once you cross over and start being involved in this kind of activity, the research from these folks that we don't always trust, at least they're being honest on this one, the research says once you ever cross over, the chances of you not repeating that are almost zero. So they register you for life.
Yeah. So the definition of occasional, or what was that?
That was right.
It was occasional. Incidental.
Right.
Isolated. Isolated.
Yeah.
It's not. It doesn't always stay isolated.
No. And the law enforcement community doesn't adhere to that. They actually make you register. And so that shows you how it's a dangerous thing.
And that's any kind of addiction.
Right.
You know how it is. I mean, the Bible talks about that too. When the unclean spirit's gone out of man, wanders about in dry places so he can rest, and he comes back, and the end of a man is worse than the first. So it's all in the Bible. It's all in the Bible.
That's right. All right, folks, we're at the top of the hour. I'm going to X myself out of this, and I think that we have another show. Are you in the next show?
No, I'm going to let these two guys do it.
Okay, so Wesley and Micah then will be coming in, and we've given you your social dose for the night. We hope everybody's on our side that's not in the homosexual community, at least, and the transvestites and transsexual community. We hope that we're still friends. And then we hope you'll listen to what does the Bible say about your soul while we've tried to help you socially. We appreciate you very much for being with us, and always ask for a word from the Lord, and you'll get what does the Bible say. Good night.
The Nelson Truck Center, located at 201 Commonwealth Boulevard inside Nelson Ford, can handle all of your light, medium, or heavy-duty truck repair needs. We've got factory-trained technicians, all of the latest software and diagnostic tools. We can handle your Dodge, Ford, Chevy, International, or any other make. We've got quick turnaround and emergency towing 24 hours a day for trucks of all sizes. Remember, that's the Nelson Truck Center, located at 201 Commonwealth Boulevard.
No, Mike, I'll do it. I'll take care of it. No, Mike. If it's broke, I'll fix it.
I might not have all the answers and all the know-how myself, but I've got the team that can get the job done. If you need your AC cooled off on your car, if it's just a little too hot, we can do that at Lee's. If your car's riding a little rough, a little bit to the side or to the right, or wearing your tires incorrectly, I've got the staff that can fix it. Not only am I the wheel king, but we'll take care of your ride the way that it should be repaired. Give us a call at Lee's Tire and Wheel, 276-638-3240, or visit us online at sigwheels.com.
This year, I want to say to the community, this could be your last chance to come to a tent. We have had Larry Serber leave the planet.
Give me a heart attack right now.
I had cancer 3 years ago. I don't know if I'm going to be here next year. Can't help myself but to get involved and pick something up. And so, hey, this could be the last time that I get to put a tent up.
Big news from Mixed Bag at Patrick Henry Mall.
I want everybody in Martinsville and Henry County to know that Big Fabric is now in the Mixed Bag building right down the street. We've merged with them. We brought everything in. We brought our fabric in. And now that it's Mixed Bag, it's just what it says, a mixture of everything. If you hadn't been to Mixed Bag in the last couple of months, you've been missing something.
Big Fabric now in Mixed Bag. Patrick Henry Mall, Martinsville.
This year, I want to say to the community, this could be your last chance to come to a tent. We have had Larry Serber leave the planet.
Give me a heart attack right now.
I had cancer 3 years ago. I don't know if I'm going to be here next year. Can't help myself but to get involved and pick something up. And so, hey, this could be the last time that I get to put a tent up.
Go with the pros. Josh's Steam Pro.
Now we know how Talisa Riddle keeps her house clean. She knows that Josh Steam Pro is the way to go.
When I call someone, I want someone to simplify my life, and that's what he does.
Josh does make it simple. He's licensed and insured, and he gives free estimates. Call him right now at 276-634-7186.
I know that when I'm gone, my house is secure. He's here, and he's going to do a great job. And when I come home, it's going to look great, smell great, and it's actually going to be healthy.
Josh specializes in carpet cleaning, upholstery cleaning, and he can deal with smoke and water damage. Look at all that dirt in the inline filter.
You can actually see the dirt.
Josh's Steam Pro is the way to go.
Plus, he can clean your air ducts. Call now to find out how you can get this free bottle of spotter. When you think clean, think Josh.
Go with the pros. Josh's Steam Pro.
This year, I want to say to the community, this could be your last chance to come to a tent. We have had Larry Serber leave the planet.
Give me a heart attack right now.
I had cancer 3 years ago. I don't know if I'm going to be here next year. Can't help myself but to get involved and pick something up. And so, hey, this could be the last time that I get to put a tent up.
Here at Martinsville Electronics, we've got all your accessories and cards that you'll need to keep your computer running. Keeping in stock new and used computers. Not only do we cover sales, but don't forget about our award-winning service, featuring great deals on Dell desktops and laptops. Martinsville Electronics, 1104 Chatham Road, across from Hooker Field, 276-632-8786.
This year, I want to say to the community, this could be your last chance to come to a tent. We have had Larry Serber leave the planet.
Give me a heart attack right now.
I had cancer 3 years ago. I don't know if I'm going to be here next year. Can't help myself but to get involved and pick something up. And so, hey, this could be the last time that I get to put a tent up.
Hi, I'm Jesse Meeks. Let's make a deal. Call me, 336-344-5000, Jesse Meeks Auctions.
No items too big, no items too small. Jesse Meeks Auctions buys and sells it all. Heavy-duty equipment, farm equipment, vehicles, motorcycles, furniture, appliances, antiques, jewelry, household items, entire yard sales, entire estate sales, houses and land. If you're selling, Jesse Meeks Auctions is buying. And if you're buying, Jesse Meeks Auctions is selling.
Hi, I'm James Meeks, and Jesse Meeks Auctions is buying and selling. Look us up online today at jessemeeks.com.
36 here, 777, call for 3 water.
This year, I want to say to the community, this could be your last chance to come to a tent. We have had Larry Serber leave the planet.
Give me a heart attack right now.
I had cancer 3 years ago. I don't know if I'm going to be here next year. Can't help myself but to get involved and pick something up. And so, hey, this could be the last time that I get to put a tent up.
Did you know that Martinsville and Henry County has one of the largest capacities for advanced film manufacturing in the world? Advanced film is a fast-growing industry with excellent opportunities for a high-paying career. The new Advanced Film certification is your pathway to this high-tech industry. Get started now on the way to your new career. Join us for either of these local opportunities to learn more. The Center for Advanced Film Manufacturing and the Advanced Film certification. Your new high-tech career awaits.
This year, I want to say to the community, this could be your last chance to come to a tent. We have had Larry Serber leave the planet.
Give me a heart attack right now.
I had cancer 3 years ago. I don't know if I'm going to be here next year. Can't help myself but to get involved and pick something up. And so, hey, this could be the last time that I get to put a tent up.
Hello everyone, and we are continuing with our tent TV. Yes, everybody's ready for the tent meeting. I know you are, and I know that you're ready for the 2 hours of television that usually follow thereafter. A special guest with us this evening, Wesley Wynn from Middleton, Tennessee, has traveled up here to help us with the tent meeting. He preached under the tent for us, and that was your first time under the tent, wasn't it, Wesley?
First time under the tent.
What
It
did
was
you think
really
of it?
good. It was very good.
Very exciting.
Yes.
Atmosphere, neutral zone for those who are interested in coming. If you feel uncomfortable about coming to a church building, that's why we have it at a tent, so that you're able to come in and mingle with everybody, and you're going to be made to feel welcome. We want people there. We want you to hear the messages. Wesley had a very good one this evening. Very simple. If there were any visitors there, no way that they can miss the truth that's being presented there this evening. So we're very thankful for that.
Right, and that's the whole point of what we're trying to do. We want to make sure that the message that we present to y'all is a message that you can understand, because if we say something to you that you can't understand, then what's the point of us even talking?
Right. That's right. And a lot of times that happens with preachers. Wesley, I don't know if you went to any preaching schools or not, but I went to a preaching school, and they tried to groom us, they tried to primp us, and in a lot of ways, I appreciate the information that I gained from the school, but one of the things that really inhibited me when I got back here was I kind of lost my edge, and I say that because they want you to be a pulpiteer. They want you to go to things, the big thing that goes on in Gatlinburg, polishing the pulpit. When you go to polishing the pulpit, there are some great speakers there. But when you're under the tent and when you're doing, information like we're doing here in TV shows and different things like that, you have to have, some charisma to you, but you also have to have some enthusiasm. And when I went to the school, they wanted you to work on your vocabulary and your enunciation, your pronunciation. But as far as really grooming you to be a go-getter and bring some punch with your sermons, that was kind of lacking, and I had to regain that when I got back here.
Right. There's kind of a difference between textbook preaching and actual getting out there and actually doing it, being around people, talking to people, trying to get the message out there, with some charisma and some enthusiasm behind it. So there's a difference between just being a textbook preacher, just making sure you're pronouncing everything correctly, which is important, but you need to speak down to earth sometimes so people can understand it.
Yeah, there's no need in getting over everybody's heads. So, but Wesley, what you think about that segment before our segment? That's some wild stuff, huh?
Right. And, when things like that are discussed, again, we don't discuss things like that because we want to pick on people and we just like to start a fight, and it's just good to just puff ourselves up. The reason we're doing this is because we want you to see from the Bible, it actually discusses these things. And we want you to see what the Bible says, what God is actually telling you that society is going to be like if people continue down these kind of paths. And that's our whole point here. We want you to see the biblical view of things, which is God's view of things.
Absolutely. And friends, if you don't like having to hear it from us, if you want to watch our television programs and you're wanting to get more Bible and you kind of want to do this on your own, there are actually 3 different documentaries on the internet surrounding Kinsey. I have one of them downloaded on my computer. It was about a 2-hour-long documentary, and it's disturbing. I was actually debating on whether or not to present some of the information on one of the shows I was going to do on a Sunday night, because I had just recently done some information on this transgender issue, surrounding the move that the governor in Houston had made, the equal rights bill that they had passed that allows, different people to go, the wrong sexes to go into the wrong bathrooms and everything such as that. But I was sitting there and I was rewatching the documentary, and I went ahead and asked my sister. She was in the office next to me, and I said, I don't know if I can do this. I said, and so I sent her the link, and I said, okay, you watch this. I said, I'm only 1 minute into the documentary, and I'm already questioning, as to where I can actually use this information, because it is disturbing, and it might make your stomach churn. But if you are the type of person that's having that type of reaction, then you're the kind of person that we need alongside of us to speak out against these things. I mean, we're doing our best to, promote this information so that what's going on out there, but we need to start building up our support so that we can really hold this thing back.
Right. We're trying to make a move to promote morality in our country, and they're making a move to really demote it. And, if we don't get people who are willing to stand up and to hold to the morals of the Bible, things are just going to start going downhill. And that's really the way it's going to be. They're going to try to get louder and louder and louder, and if we don't speak up, then we're just going to get quieter, quieter, and quieter, to where we just don't oppose anything,
Right.
and nobody will stand for anything, and they just have their way with society. And think about what Mike is saying, how disturbing these things are. Well, that's probably the way society could become. Society is going to become that way, disturbing, if we continue to let these things go unchallenged.
And Weston, one thing that we continue to see as we go out, we're out door knocking and we're trying to personally invite people in our community to come out to the tent. I mean, it's already gotten to the point where people are afraid to even come to their doors anymore. I mean, we'll be standing on the front porch and we'll hear like the TV or something going on inside, maybe kids running around, whatever, and we'll knock on the door, we'll ring the doorbell, and we'll stand there and nobody will come.
Yeah.
And it's like, we're standing out there, we know you're home, but this is what is happening to our society, to where we can't even feel safe in our own environments because of how our society is.
Right. I remember growing up, my parents used to tell me that, or my grandparents rather used to tell me that they would leave the house and the door would just be unlocked because you didn't have to worry about people getting in your homes and stuff. But now you can't leave it unlocked. Even if you live in a small town, well, I know everybody, but still sometimes you can't leave things unattended to. So.
Well, friends, I know James will certainly be continuing this information. He said that in between the break. So every night this week we're going to be on television. Tomorrow night we'll be on the Reidsville station, 9 to 10. Wednesday night we're still working on where our 2-hour segment is going to be, but we're still going to have for sure our 9 to 10 hour, What Does the Bible Say? Thursday's already covered in Reidsville, 8 to 10 Thursday night. And then Friday night, 8 to 10 again, and we'll do that again, next week. So this evening, at this point, Wesley, we're going to kind of change some gears here. Before we were talking about some social issues. Well, now we really want to get back to, Bible and doctrinal issues of some of the other, denominations that are around us, man-made traditions. From what I understand, you've kind of got people stirred up in, back home, down there in Middleton, Tennessee.
Yes, I have a lot of people stirred up. And, I'm going to tell you this, you hear denominational people say, well, it doesn't matter what you believe or it doesn't matter what church you're in as long as you have a relationship with Jesus. They don't really believe that. They'll tell you that and they'll assert things like that, but if you do not agree with their doctrine, then they're not going to accept you. And they really consider their doctrine to be the gospel.
Right.
And folks, it's not about whose doctrine is the gospel. The only doctrine that's the gospel is God's doctrine. The only thing that is going to be the gospel is what you can read in this book right here, and that's what we're trying to promote here. Now, in the community that I come from, it's predominantly Baptist. That's the predominant religion in that particular area. Now, most of the Baptists that I've talked to try to promote themselves as, we're Christians, we're members of the church that you read about in the Bible. They try to promote themselves as that, but the problem is, folks, have you ever seen the Baptist church in the Bible? And I know we bring that up a lot, but the reason we bring that up is simply for the fact that when you do things in your religion that cannot be found in the Bible, God condemns that. Most of these pastors will tell you, well, the Baptist church isn't in the Bible, but it doesn't matter because we're part of the one big universal church. So if we come up with a little man-made denomination and put it in there, it's not really going to hurt anything. You've been basically told it doesn't matter. I want you to notice a verse. Look in Matthew chapter 15 if you're at home, you have your Bibles. Notice this verse, Matthew chapter 15, and I think Micah's going to bring it up on the screen for us, but Matthew chapter 15, look there at the very beginning of it in verse 1. This is something that you're going to be reading about here about Jesus and his run-in that he had with the Pharisees. In Matthew chapter 15, verses 1 and 2, it says, Then came to Jesus scribes and Pharisees, which were of Jerusalem, saying, now watch this in verse 2 here, why do thy disciples transgress the tradition, now look at that word there, the tradition of the elders, for they wash not their hands before they eat bread. Now, the washing of hands before they ate bread, that was not something that was in the Bible. The Pharisees were coming up to Jesus and they were saying, Jesus, you and your disciples are not washing your hands according to the tradition of our elders. Now, that wasn't in the Bible, but the Pharisees were running around telling their people, yeah, hand washing isn't in the Bible, but it doesn't really matter. It's not going to make a big difference. It doesn't matter that's not in there. God's okay with it. Well, look in verse 9. Let's go on down and look in verse 9. Jesus actually responds to this. And what did Jesus say? Well, you're right. It's not in the Bible, so I guess it really doesn't matter. I want you to notice this, folks. Verse 9, Jesus says here, but in vain they do worship me. Why? He says their religion is vain. Their religion is empty, it's useless, it's meaningless. Why? He said, because they're trying to worship me according to the doctrines of men, the commandments given by men. In other words, Jesus said, they're doing something that's not in the Bible. Jesus didn't sit back and say, well, it's okay, it doesn't matter. Jesus says it's wrong. So we learn from that doing unbiblical things is not something that God accepts.
And certainly, Wesley, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and you have the Essenes and several other parties that came along during that 400 year period of silence in between the Old Testament and the New Testament. They actually are the first denominations to come on the scene. Under the law of Moses, under the system that they had, under the covenant system that God had given them, you had these men come along, and this is some of the things that they started teaching. These were some of the things, in fact, that started separating them from the other groups. What made a Pharisee a Pharisee? Well, here's one of the things, is that they were involved in this, in this hand washing. And it's not hand washing like how we think.
Right,
they didn't have, they didn't have the running water, and they stand under there for a minute and they scrub with soap and everything like that. It was a drawn out ceremony. You had, people involved in this party. You would hold out one hand and they would pour water over that, and then you would dry it off, and then you would pour water on the other hand. You would dry that off. Then you pour water into both hands, and you dry that off. And there's actually another step in there that I believe I'm missing, but I can't recall it at the time.
Right, but the basic point is, they didn't wash hands like we do before we eat, just we want to get them clean, don't want to get germs. They washed hands as a religious act, a religious practice. Now, when you go by and you form a denomination as a religious group that is not in the Bible, what is the difference? See, that's what your denominational pastors are going to have to answer. What is the difference between them adding hand washing to the Bible and then you adding the Baptist church or whatever other denomination to the Bible? What's the difference with that?
And, Wesley, if they want to add in, hand washing, that's, in my mind, hey, that's fine. If y'all want to wash hands before you meet, whatever. But, for you to start binding that on me as something that I have to do, we have some brethren that are like that, centered around one cup and one loaf, and not eating in the building and things such as that. But it's the idea that, look, if that's what you're wanting to do, and that's fine, but you cannot then bind that as law. And that's what the Pharisees are actually doing. They're trying to bind that as law, as though God has given it, and that's the point that Jesus was making.
Right.
You're actually promoting man-made rules, which with the Baptists, for example, like the Southern Baptist, I know for sure, they had the massive Southern Baptist Convention, where they actually get together, and I believe I saw on James Oldfield's Facebook, he was referencing something that Eric Pitcock said in Gamaliel, Kentucky, how that the Southern Baptist Convention actually got together, and if you can believe this, they were actually discussing, I believe, the legitimacy of homosexuality. Now, the Southern Baptists, people who are supposed to be, students of the Bible and following what the Bible says, they're actually getting together and discussing homosexual, just the basic fact that they're even discussing it as if they're going to allow it is beyond me. That amazes me.
Right, what that shows you is that people are not just using the Bible as authority, they're actually sitting down and voting on these things. We need to have a council together to do these things, and you'll be surprised at the amount of people in the denominations who go by something that a council voted on hundreds of years ago. The Council of Nicaea or the Council of, the Council of Trent, all these different things, people will still go by what they voted on. Well, they voted on back this, and, back then they did this, and so we need to go by that. Back with Augustine and Pelagius, they voted on this, so we need to stick with that. Is that not going by the traditions of men, rather than the Bible as your authority?
And, it's funny, too, Wesley, how that they have to keep having these conferences and keep having to vote on these things, and oftentimes how their views will change. Not too long ago, on a past episode of the Headliners, Dad was on here with a pastor, minister, whatever she is. That's really an issue of semantics with them. When you go and ask for the minister, they'll bring you to the pastor. So that's just a play on words with them. But anyways, she's a female minister, and Dad had the manual, the Pentecostal manual, Pentecostal holiness manual for her particular group. And this was back in the 1970s when they were first coming on the scene. And in the 1970 issue of their manual, guess what they said about women ministers, women elders, women deacons? It's not allowed.
It's not allowed.
During that time, it was not allowed. But now, here we are 2014, 2013, when the Headliners was taking place, now they're letting people in. or women, take these roles?
Right. Did the Bible change?
And that's the question we're asking.
Yeah. Did the Bible change its laws?
I mean, were they right in 1970 when they weren't allowing women preachers, or are they right now? And during, in the manual, it talks about the person who is writing the manual being led by the Holy Spirit. Now, did the Holy Spirit make a mistake?
Right. Had to change it later. And it goes back to the whole Southern Baptist Convention thing. What if they got together and they ended up saying, well, we're going to accept homosexuality? Again, did the Bible change? I mean, what this shows you, I don't say it gets any clearer than this. What this shows you is that people are not using the Bible as the final authority. Now, people can say they are, and most people you talk to will say, oh, yes, we believe the Bible. It's our final authority. But really, when it boils down to it, Micah, a lot of times it's not.
Right.
So you have to get past what people say. You can say anything. I can say the moon is made out of green cheese, but that doesn't mean that it really is.
Right.
I can say I'm going by the Bible as my sole authority, sola scriptura, all I want, but that doesn't mean that I really am.
Well, in the book of Titus, it actually makes reference to those who make fair words that they know God and that they're following Him, but their deeds speak differently.
Right.
And friends, that's the point that we're ultimately trying to bring about with the Churches of Christ and the message that we are presenting. We truly are a different class, a different set of people. That not only do we claim to follow the Bible, but in fact, if you really watch our lives, we are following what the Bible says. And, Wesley, another headliner's dad and Charles were sitting at that table, and they were talking about, some of the confusion that's going on around in the religious world. And Charles is saying, that's kind of part of the reason that I'm turned off by religion, is just because it's so confusing. And then he tried, then he tried to say, he asked Dad a question, and Dad made a statement about it. And then he said, well, don't you sometimes feel like you're putting into the, you're part of the problem with the confusion? And I can't remember Dad's response, but I remember sitting there watching it thinking, well, the reason why you're confused still is because you haven't seen anything like us. You're used to seeing all the fakeness, all the traditions, all the man-made rules. And now here we come actually giving you what the Bible says, while you've got all this in your mind, and what we're saying doesn't make sense yet. But if you really just, give us some time and really pay attention to what we're saying, you'll realize, okay, they're really doing what the Bible says.
Right. People are so indoctrinated that when you come and you present something to them that they've never heard before, like most people who are out in the denominations, we present to them, look, the Bible doesn't teach denominations. Denominationalism is something that men started, and we shouldn't follow it. It doesn't register with a lot of people because all people have ever known is denominationalism. Right. So it's hard sometimes to get it through their head that, look, in the Churches of Christ, we're not trying to be another denomination. The world has enough of those already. We're not trying to add to the confusion. We're just trying to get back to the Bible and fix it.
Right.
We just want to do what this says to do, period.
And, if God is not the author of confusion, then we should be able to be confident in what He tells us to do. That, hey, if we will do this, and in fact, it'll bring us together.
Right.
But that's what the devil ultimately wants. He wants us to be divided. And going back to the topic that was discussed in the previous hour, or the previous hour, that is dividing us on all fronts. I mean, even the most strictest of religious people, when they realize that, and this is oftentimes how it goes, when they realize, okay, my daughter or my son is now involved in this, in what I know as being sin, well, then now I have that emotional pull that, I want to be understanding to them, I want to care for them, and I want to love them. And oftentimes, people allow their love and their concern and their care for their offspring or family members to go over their love and their care and their concern for what the Bible actually says.
Right. And that's true when it comes to any point of doctrine. If you find out that denominations aren't in the Bible, the automatic first thing people want to do is, well, I can't accept that because I have somebody that I love who's in a denomination, and so I can't accept that. But, by having that mindset, you're letting your own emotions, you're letting your own thoughts dictate what is truth. You're not letting God do it, you're letting yourself do it, and it's all centered upon what you want to accept or what you don't want to accept, what you can and cannot go with. And really, it shouldn't be that way. It's supposed to be centered upon God and what He's told us to do.
Well, Wesley, let's talk now about some of the stuff that's going on back home, or some of the stuff that has gone on back home. If I understand correctly, you're able to convert several of your family members out of Baptist churches. What were some of the you know, to kind of help our people in our community to realize, you know, look, this isn't something that Churches of Christ are only doing in this area. I mean, you're basically doing a lot of the same things that we're doing here in Milton, Tennessee, just without the TV program.
Right. Well, just to kind of give you the summary of it all, you know, really it started with my parents. You know, growing up with my own personal background, I was always brought up in the Baptist church, and I was always brought up, you know, really we were brought up Southern Baptist is what we really were. We were always brought up that way. That's just the way we were taught. My grandfather actually was a Baptist pastor. He actually was a Baptist preacher. And so we were just naturally brought up that way. And really and truly, if you want to know the honest truth of it, I kind of studied myself out of it. I began visiting the Churches of Christ, and, you know, in my mind, that's just another denomination. We're all going to heaven. It doesn't matter. There's no really real difference. You know, they may have music, we don't, or we have music and they don't. Well, it's not that big of a difference. But as I began to study the Bible, I came to realize these different denominations are teaching different things, and I can't believe them all. If I'm going to be consistent, I'm going to have to go with something. And I want to make sure that something I'm going with is actually in the Bible. And one of the things that really bothered me was the whole idea, and I was always taught to do this, the whole idea of being saved, all you have to do is just accept Jesus or say a prayer, which is what I was taught. One thing that really bothered me is that I couldn't find it. And, you know, I thought, well, if this is really what they did in the Bible, if this is what was really taught, shouldn't I be able to find it all throughout the Bible? So that's one thing that bothered me. And eventually, like I say, I studied myself out of it and finally came to obey the gospel. And later on in time, I began to teach my parents this and to show them this and to get them to realize that you need to question things. You know, in Acts chapter 17, verse 11, when the apostles were going around teaching, Acts 17:11 says about the people of Berea that when they heard the apostles teach, that they actually searched the scriptures daily to make sure that what the apostles were saying, all right, these were apostles, and these people still stopped and said, we're not going to take you for it at your word. We want to actually stop and search the scriptures for ourselves to see if it's the truth or not. So if they did that to the apostles, all right, inspired apostles, people still compared their teachings to the Bible, don't you think we ought to do that to our pastors that are out there? Don't you think we ought to do that to all the different religious teachers that are out there? If they did that to the apostles, I think we ought to be doing that to the religious teachers out there. And we want you to even do it to us. We're not going to sit up here and say, well, check them out, but don't check us out. Just take us at our word. I mean, that's not what we're telling you. We want you to check us out. We want you to ask questions. We want you to present these things. We want you to do all this.
And, you know, Wesley, I'm guessing that you're pretty familiar with some of our past shows. You know, you've seen some of the YouTube clips and everything like that. Have you seen the reaction that, say, for example, that, you know, that Mark and I have received from different preachers and going in and questioning, you know, different things that they're doing? You've seen some of those?
Yes, yes.
You know, when we first started doing that, you know, I can remember hearing Dad on the television program, you know, encouraging, you know, people to, you know, ask your preacher these questions. You know, ask these questions to your preacher. And then we started doing it for the people. And when we started receiving that type of attention and that type of hostility, it really opened up my eyes, you know, Wesley, as to the kind of control that these preachers and these pastors actually have in these churches. I mean, they are very dominating in their role as this pastor, as this head shepherd with these people, to the point where, you know, I would, you know, seeing that, you know, seeing a visitor come in and ask the pastor a simple question, where is the sinner's prayer in the Bible, and then to have them run out of the building, you know, like they had a plague or something, I'd be afraid to ask questions.
Right. And here's another point, you know, if you really have the truth, like you say you do, why do you have to run people off for asking questions? I mean, did the apostles run the Bereans off for asking questions? Well, stop asking these questions, you need to get out of here. I mean, they didn't do that. So why is your preachers doing that if they're really telling you the truth? And talking about the whole, you know, one-man pastor system, you know, the pastor is considered to be the shepherd of the flock. I remember back, I guess it was last year sometime, one of the pastors of the churches there, of the Baptist churches there in town where I'm from, we actually challenged him to a debate, and I figured, you know, well, he's supposed to be the pastor, he's supposed to be the shepherd of the church. I just assumed he had the authority to say yay or nay to it. But when we actually presented it to him and brought that proposition to him of debate, he said, well, I had to ask the deacons first. And I thought, well, hold on a minute. That would actually make them the shepherds and you the deacon, because they're actually overseeing the work that you do. And he also went on to say that really the whole congregation, if I understood him right, was going to have to vote on it. And if one person of the congregation voted no towards it, they wouldn't do it. And then I got to thinking, well, that kind of makes it where the entire congregation is shepherds. The entire, every member of the congregation is a pastor in some sense. So one thing I've noticed is that sometimes it's to where they're a pastor when it suits them, but whenever something like this comes up, it doesn't really suit them to be a pastor. Well, I have no say over it. They're not so much a pastor anymore. One thing that really boils down to is sometimes they get challenged and they just don't want to say no, but they don't want to say yes either, right. So they have to come up with some kind of a cop-out. But, you know, and that happens a lot. That happens a lot of times.
Well, Wesley, we got a phone call here. We'll hit that line and see how everybody's doing. Good evening. What's the Bible say?
Yes, the Bible said be ye holy. But at the school, they talk about the military. They showed them what the military guns look like in the book. But they gave them to the Iraq. They sit all the weapons over there.
All right. I'm not sure what that has to do with our topic and weapons in Iraq. We're not dealing with physical warfare here. We're battling in a spiritual sense. So Wesley, what were some of the issues that you faced? I mean, you've already mentioned, you know, your situation. I didn't even realize all of that. You know, I didn't realize that you had come out of the Baptist church yourself. And I found it interesting that you were actually, using your brain while you were involved in this search. Because, you know, a lot of the people that we come into contact with them and we discuss with them, they're always, you know, talking about, you know, the Spirit needing to lead them and the Spirit taking over them and, you know, these type of pools and everything such as that. But you're actually saying that you were sitting there logically thinking, reasonably thinking, listening and receiving the information and trying to bring in what needs to bring in and sift out whatever was not needing to be there.
Right. Well, it goes back to the principle that God himself laid out. You remember in Isaiah 1:18, God spoke to the people there and he told them, come, let us reason together. He didn't say, well, wait till you get some supernatural feeling of the Spirit to guide you. He said, think about this. Let's think about the way that you're living. Let's think about what I'm telling you here, and let's reason on this. Use your mind. You know, folks, God gave you a mind for a reason. The reason God gave you that mind is so you could use the mind to reason and to think and to make the right choice.
And then, you know, so I'm hearing you say that you were listening, you were receiving, you were reasoning, and then you finally came to the conclusion that I'm going to have to make a change.
Right. You know, like I said, I realized that there's so many different things being taught out there that I'm going to have to, you know, go with something. I mean, you're eventually going to have to go with something. And I came to realize that, well, what I'm going with here isn't lining up. And I realized that what I need to go with is just the Bible. And I know that's so simple, and I know we keep bringing that up, but the reason we keep bringing up just go with the Bible is because people are not doing that. They say that and they can make that claim, but we actually challenge them. We challenge them to do that, and many times we can't get them to take us up on it. You know, if you really are following the Bible like you claim, why would you have a problem, rather, with discussing that? Why would you have a problem with showing people? You know, as a matter of fact, the preacher that I was trying to get a debate with, he actually told me that he was not comfortable doing a debate because the doctrine that he held to, he said Calvinism is put in a bad light, and if I was to debate that, people may just not like it. So I thought, well, the response that I gave to him to that was, well, debate might be a good way for you to put it in a good light for me. Yeah. If it is the truth, and you believe that it is, obviously, are you ashamed of the truth? Do you think that, well, I shouldn't do that because people might not like the truth? I mean, did Jesus do that? Jesus spoke the truth to people whether they liked him or not. John chapter 6, after Jesus told the people that statement there about you cannot follow me unless it be given to you, the Bible says there that many of them stopped following him. So we know Jesus did not back down, even though his doctrine was not necessarily accepted by certain people.
So you're hearing this information, you're reasoning it out, you're shifting things around in how you believe, and then finally reaching the conclusion that changes need to be made. And I'll even attest to the fact that change is difficult. We as human beings, we often become creatures of habit. We get into routines, and especially when it comes to matters of faith and things that we believe, I don't know if you've seen any of the past shows, but I've made a lot of reference to some of the discussion that Dad and Caleb and I and James have had in some of our jam sessions, if you will, and sermon prep. Caleb was going to make an illustration about how a ostrich will stick its head in the sand when it's in danger. It'll run for a little while, but then it'll stop and then supposedly stick its head in the sand, and it thinks that it's hit. Well, he said he was going to use that as an illustration. Then James looked it up, several different sites, National Geographic for one, and they said that's a myth. That in fact ostriches do not stick their heads in the sand. Well, guess what? Caleb, Dad, and I wanted to do with James. We wanted to argue with James because we've always been told this, and for us to, and even something so silly as whether or not an ostrich sticks its head in the sand when it's afraid, we weren't willing to give that up because that's what we had been told. Somebody somewhere that we trusted had told us that an ostrich did this. And now here comes along, James, which, not saying we don't trust James, but, here comes James, and he's taking that away from us. And it's uneasy. It makes a person uneasy. It's kind of scary. It's kind of frightening. But, at the same point, we had to lay aside our belief because James had the evidence.
Right.
He had looked it up, and he could give us evidence, but all we could say was, well, this is what I've heard. And that's very similar to what we get from the religious world. Well, my preacher says this. My preacher said that. Well, this is just what my family has always believed. This is what my mom has taught me. This is what my daddy's taught me. Not, saying that your mom and dad and, these other people are intentionally leading you in the wrong direction, but you need to go to a better standard than what your preacher says. You need to be getting for yourself, what does the Bible say? I need book, chapter, and verse for all of these things that I'm espousing to do, especially in the realm of salvation. Making my soul right with God. Was that a difficult point for you to kind of rationalize?
It was at a point, but there came to a point where I thought, well, if it comes to my soul salvation, this is what it says. I want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But some people, I've even had people say that they don't care what the Bible says. That they'll be wrong. They're going to be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't care. It's all about what they want. But again, like I say, we want people to search the Bible. That's what we want you to do, and we challenge you to do that. And again, we want to give you opportunities. We want you to debate us.
Right.
I mean, if we are wrong, publicly show us where we are wrong. We are giving you an open opportunity. We're putting a target right on our head saying, shoot it. But we won't have people take us up. But then they'll turn right around and say, but we have the truth and they're wrong. Okay, if you have the truth and we are wrong, here's your opportunity. We want you to take this opportunity.
And, friends, not only will we give you opportunities, but we're even offering you a reward. If you can give us certain doctrinal points, book, chapter, and verse for what you believe. Wesley, we've had a standing offer for, not as far back as I can remember, Dad first coming up here, $1,000 reward for the sinner's prayer in the Bible. Now, do you think that we've had to give away $1,000 yet?
I doubt it.
No, we haven't had to give it away once. The sinner's prayer, faith only, give us book, chapter, and verse for that. Give us book, chapter, and verse for, your church. Give us book, chapter, and verse for the Baptist church, for the Methodist church, for the Pentecostal church. After the day of, after Jesus died and was laid in the grave for 3 days and arose. But that's how far we're willing to go to try to bring you about to study the Word of God with us. Even putting up the tent. That's not for our benefit. That is for the benefit of the community. Now, we enjoy it. It brings us out and gets us, working together and evangelizing together, and a lot of fellowship is going on. But really, this is for the people of Henry County and of Martinsville. We are trying to bring you information. I mean, Wesley has driven all the way from Middleton, Tennessee, to preach to you till Wednesday, I believe it is. Y'all be heading out Thursday.
Right.
So you have tomorrow night and Wednesday night to come out and hear Wesley. And then, I'm kind of afraid that you'll be stuck with us again underneath the tent. But we're doing this for you. We want you to hear these messages. We want you to hear this type of preaching so that you can get right with God. Now, Wesley, what about some other individuals from your family? Were they also involved in some of your studies?
Yeah, after my parents, after I studied with them, both of them basically saw, and they kind of saw it on their own too. I just really challenged them. I said, you know, I brought up some points and I challenged them on them, and they went to basically study it for themselves. And they basically, I remember one night my mom was sitting down and she was reading the Bible, and I walked in to the room where she was in, and she just told me, she said, you know, I think I want to be baptized. And she basically started saying that, you know, she's starting to realize that all the stuff she's been saying just wasn't there. And after I, you know, talked with my parents, we also went to talk with Heather's parents, and we did eventually manage to convert her mom. And we're still studying with other ones, and we're still trying to help them, and we still have studies going. So, needless to say, I'm not a very popular guy with the denominations in that community. But again, you know, I'm not going around doing this because I want to just cause a fuss or I want to make people upset. You know, I'm trying to do this because I want to challenge people to actually search the Bible for themselves, and again, go back to just simply doing what it says.
Now, Wesley, didn't you say that you actually were converting them out of different Baptist churches?
Yeah, they basically, the people that I have converted so far have really come out of 3 particular Baptist churches that are within our town. There's a lot of Baptist churches where I come from, but in our town, if you just drive through the road, I mean, you just pass one right after another. So there's a whole lot of them. 2 of them have been independent Baptist churches, and one of them was the Southern Baptist Church, really the Southern Baptist Church where I grew up in, but we've been doing a lot of work on there so far.
And it's, you know, it's really sad, friends, that, you know, here we are. I mean, I'm not saying you and I, but we collectively, we're supposed to be together in this thing. You know, we're all supposed to be Christians. We're all supposed to be, you know, heading to the same place. But even within, you know, the Baptist church, there are, you know, several distinctions within the Baptist church. And here you are, you know, you're trying to convert, you know, people from within single families, but yet you're having to do so from at least three different Baptist churches.
Right.
So even these, you know, these small family units, even they are being broken up because of these different man-made religions.
Right, right. You know, again, it goes back to what the Bible says. God condemns division. You can look in Galatians chapter 5, verse 19, where Paul mentions the works of the flesh. And one of the things that he mentions there in the King James Version is seditions. And that word seditions there has reference to the idea of division. In other words, this verse is telling you God is not going to tolerate, God does not promote division when it comes to religious matters. Yet denominational people are telling us, well, it's okay, we can have these divisions on these peripheral issues so long as we keep our one core doctrine of Jesus as the Christ. As long as we keep that pure, these peripheral things don't matter. I want you to think about this verse that Michael put up on the screen for us. Think about 1 Timothy chapter 4. 1 Timothy chapter 4. And I want us to really quick think about this verse. In 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 1, Paul is actually warning Timothy about false doctrine that's going to come. Now look at what he says in 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 1. He says, "Now the Spirit speaketh expressly, that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith." All right, they're going to depart from the faith. How are they going to depart from the faith? Well, they're going to stop believing that Jesus is the Messiah. They're going to start messing with the core doctrines of the Christian faith. Well, notice the rest of the verse here. Verse 2. How are they going to depart from the faith? He says, "Speaking lies and hypocrisy, having their conscience seared with a hot iron." Here it is, verse 3. "Forbidding to marry, and commanding to abstain from meats which God hath created to be received with thanksgiving." Now hold up, Paul. Those are peripheral issues. You can't sit there and condemn people for these peripheral issues. You can't do that. They got the core right. They still believe in Jesus. Paul's not saying they're going to start saying Jesus isn't the Messiah. That's not what he's talking about here. Here he's saying they're going to start teaching these kinds of things. They're going to forbid you to marry. They're going to say you have to abstain from certain meats. All these different things that denominational people are telling you are just peripheral. It doesn't matter. Did Paul say it didn't matter? You know, when it came to hand washing, you know, the Pharisees were saying, well, yeah, you know, we're teaching that. It's not in the Bible, but it's peripheral. It doesn't matter. Is that what Jesus said? Remember, Matthew 15:9, Jesus said, "In vain do they worship me, because they're teaching for their doctrines the commandments of men."
You know, that makes me think of Matthew chapter 5 also, how that, you know, Jesus in his Sermon on the Mount, he was hitting very heavily on the religious fractures during his time. And in particular, he discusses the Pharisees and the scribes. Very heavily, he focused a lot on the Pharisees in Matthew chapter 23, actually pointing out the position that they held. They actually sat in Moses' seat. Now that's a great seat of authority. Moses, the lawgiver, and you're going to sit in his seat. So that was the realm in which the Pharisees actually held. And in Matthew chapter 5, in verse 20, notice what he actually says. You were talking about these peripheral issues, hand washing and things like that. In discussing the overall view of the Pharisees, he said in Matthew chapter 5, verse 20, "For I say unto you that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, ye shall in no case enter into the kingdom of heaven." Now, if it is the case that one group is just as good as another, and it doesn't really matter what you do doctrinally, then why would Jesus make this statement here? That if they were good enough, if it really just matters, it matters in the main focus is believing in Jesus Christ, and that's all you need, then why didn't the Pharisees work out?
Right. Many of the Pharisees believed in Jesus. In John 12, verse 42, the Bible says that nevertheless, many of them believed in Jesus. They believed that he was the Messiah, but because of the synagogue, they would not confess him. Mm-hmm. So, again, what religious people are saying, well, these are just peripheral issues like instrumental music or not instrumental music, this, that, and that, and the other. Where's that in the Bible? And, Wesley, I've actually had some people, and you brought up the works of the flesh a moment ago. I've actually had some people try to say that even these things listed here in Galatians chapter 5, beginning in verse 19, that as long as, we're focused on Jesus Christ and we're focused on his love and we're, showing that love to others, then this young lady actually said, all these other little things, if you want to debate over all these little things, then you're really missing the point. And I'm sitting there thinking, I didn't realize sin has become a little thing, these days. Right. These
are things very clearly that Paul is saying, you don't, if you're going to be a Christian, you don't do these things.
Right. Well, it goes back to what he said in 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 1, where he talks about the people forbidding to marry or forbidding to eat meats. You can make the same argument with Paul. Paul, I think you're missing the point. You're just skipping over all the main issues. You're dealing with these peripheral issues. You're just getting off the point. Was Paul really getting off the point when he was talking about those things? One thing that many people like to do is they like to point out Galatians chapter 1 in verses 6 through 8. I think Micah's going to pull it up. But in Galatians 1, 6 through 8, Paul talks about how people are teaching you another gospel. And I don't know how many Baptist preachers bring this verse up and say that because you teach baptism is necessary for the remission of your sins, you're doing what Paul said here. You are teaching another gospel. You're teaching a different gospel. You're perverting it, and you're being anathematized because you teach something different. Well, in the context here of Galatians chapter 1, what was actually going on here is that many individuals were starting to teach that circumcision was necessary for salvation. They say, well, see, because they added circumcision to the plan of salvation, Paul anathematized them. He said, you're accursed. If you add baptism to the plan of salvation, why would that not follow as well? Here's the thing, folks. The reason Paul said they were condemned for adding circumcision to the gospel was because the apostles never taught circumcision as a part of the plan of salvation. Never. As a matter of fact, in Acts chapter 15, the apostles actually gathered together to discuss this issue with certain individuals. And in Acts 15, if you drop down to verse 24, the apostle Paul talks about this. Why did you condemn, or the apostles rather talk about why they condemned teaching circumcision? Verse 24, it says, "For as much as we have heard that certain men went out from us, having troubled you with words, subverting your souls, saying you must be circumcised and keep the law, to whom," watch it now, "we gave no such commandment." Why did they condemn circumcision? Because they never taught it. Guess what, y'all? Baptism was commanded by the apostles. Acts 10, verse 48, when Peter went to preach to the household of Cornelius. Acts 10, verse 48, look at what Peter, this is an inspired apostle, and he suggested to them. He said, well, it's very important. You should do this, but you don't have to. He commanded them to be baptized in the name of the Lord. Then they prayed them to tarry certain days. Let me ask you this question. Do you have to love Jesus to get to heaven? People say, well, of course you have to love Jesus to get to heaven. All right, well, how do you love Jesus? Well, the only way I know that the Bible says to love Jesus, in John 14:15, Jesus said, if you love me, keep my commandments. All right? To get to heaven, I have to love Jesus. How do I love Jesus? I keep his commandments. What are one of those commandments? Well, you've just seen from Acts 10:48, baptism. I mean, that alone ought to be enough to get you to understand that baptism is essential. If we are going to truly manifest love for Jesus, if we're going to truly love him the way he tells us to, then we're going to do this. And this automatically becomes essential.
And it really caught my eye here, Wesley, in what you're referencing in Acts chapter 15, verse 24. It sounds like that the apostles and the other men that are meeting in Jerusalem over this issue are actually discussing renegade preachers, if you will, that are just going around preaching, whatever they feel like preaching. That in fact, and that is very important for, I think, our audience to understand. You should not just believe any preacher that just blows into town and then starts preaching to you some unknown doctrine that you've never heard of before. But instead, I mean, we're referencing here in Acts chapter 15, verse 24, that there was a standard. There was something they were following. If there was no rule, if there was no canon, if you will, if there was no measuring stick, then how could they say, and keep to whom we gave no such commandment? They wouldn't have been able to say that if there was no authority. If it was just the case that, hey, this is what I believe, this is what I think, this is what makes me feel good, then they had no right to say they have no business preaching this. But instead, they try to put a stop to it.
Right. And again, you have to realize that here in Acts 15, with the people going around teaching circumcision, for the most part, these were brethren. Mm-hmm. These were actually Jewish people who converted into Christianity, and they had converted and became members of the church, but they were wanting to revert back to that Old Testament law. Mm-hmm. And again, the reason they condemned them teaching circumcision for salvation was because that's not what the apostles taught. Mm-hmm. The apostles never went around teaching people, commanding them to be circumcised. They never did that, but they did go around command people to be baptized.
And Wesley, another interesting point dealing with circumcision, wasn't that in fact an ordinance given by God?
Yes, in the Old Testament, yes.
In fact, circumcision was something that God had given to Abraham as a covenant, as a sign that I'm going to keep my promises to you and to this bloodline, and look at what we have happening. This is something that God had actually ordained to take place, but now it's been moved out of the way. Now, what do you think God is going to do to you when you're going around teaching something that he has not ordained?
Exactly.
That really is the big difference between Judaism and the denominations that we're facing today. God never even made any reference to you. But the system that the Jews were under, God at one point had told them, okay, this is what you're going to do. But now, we've gotten so bad, people read the Bible and they look at the Jews and just think, man, just look at how terrible the Jews were. But really, just think of how terrible we are as Gentiles, in that we are going about establishing our own salvation by man-made traditions, man-made doctrines that God has never given any type of authority for.
Right,
and
exactly.
That is a very scary, that should be a very scary thought to those that are in man-made traditions.
Right. Well, dealing with this whole thing with, baptism and circumcision and, people adding up these different traditions and people adding these different things that God never commanded, that goes on all the time, and people are in these things for so long. You hear something told to you as being truth for so long, like, you said about the ostrich thing. I always heard that. What you just said then kind of came as a shock to me. But it's true. If you hear something long enough, even if it's not in the Bible, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter because you've heard it for so long that it's just truth to your mind, and anything different, even if it is in the Bible, you have a hard time accepting.
Right. Well, friends, we certainly hope that you have been paying attention to the information that has been presented this evening. If you haven't been paying attention, why not come out to the tent and let's give it another try. Wesley will be speaking to us tomorrow night, 7 p.m. This could be the last tent meeting, and you can interpret that. This is one of the things, Wesley, you can interpret it however you like. It could be that, we at the Martinsville Church of Christ, we're not going to do any more tent meetings. It could be that, this might be the last tent meeting that Dad, has a hand in, or it could be the case that this is your last tent meeting that you may not live to the next one. So why not take the opportunity now instead of taking the risk, taking the chance on, well, I'll do it some other time. So come out to the tent tomorrow night, 7 p.m. in between the Hampton Inn and Frederick's Eye Care Center. No collections, but questions are welcome. Wesley, thank you for coming on with us. And friends, have a good night, and always ask for, what does the Bible say? And you will get a word from the Lord.
This year, I want to say to the community, this could be your last chance to come to a tent. We have had Larry Serber leave the planet.
Give me a heart attack right now.
I had cancer 3 years ago. I don't know if I'm going to be here next year. Can't help myself but to get involved and pick something up. And so, hey, this could be the last time that I get to put a tent up.
Green now, and we do believe weather to be a factor. As you can see, it's pouring down rain there on that scene, and I can tell you it was actually hard to get to this scene because it was raining so hard you really couldn't see very far in front of you, very poor visibility. We do know this vehicle overturned right past the 58 exit is where on the bypass this is. There you see that vehicle completely overturned, quite a bit of damage to it. It appeared to have left the road about 75